Welcome in to another edition of the Carpenter Show. My man Anthony Schlegel here riding shotgun. It's Thursday, college football week 1. We will actually have games being played tonight. One of the biggest games you're going to find me. Probably the two big games this evening. We've talked a little bit about them throughout the week. We've got Minnesota, North Carolina. Plus we have North Dakota State visiting Colorado. And because of that, we're going to have our guy Ari Temkin on. Does a lot of work with the Big 12. Fantastic. Worked with him at SiriusXM. And he also, we can talk some about that Penn State, West Virginia matchup, Schlegs, which I'm very excited to kind of dive into as well, as those are some of the preeminent games that are going to be going on this week in the world of college football. Also, we've got some news coming in a little bit about NIL stuff, what that's going to look like, top NIL foundations, who's making the most, which we'll dive into as well. But I wanted to start off with this. Will Howard had some, comments off the jump. And for those who don't know, he's a Kansas State transfer and played for 4 years there. Now back at Ohio State, but back in the Midwest. Schlegs, do you have any idea where Will Howard is originally from?
I think he's from Western PA, if I'm not mistaken. That might be Eastern PA.
He's got a 484 area code. He's from Eastern PA. And I saw that, and I was kind of amazed. I joked with him some about, why Ryan Day didn't recruit him initially off the jump. He's like, yeah, I was a 2-3 star. We've had some laughs about it. But he is fully aware of the Big Ten, because that's the conference he grew up rooting for. Talking his media availability, just how excited he was to go play in Ohio Stadium and what that meant to him. And, for a guy who grew up in this part of the country, seeing these iconic venues, Beaver Stadium, the Shoe, the Big House, like all of those great places that they have in the traditional Big Ten Conference, being a Pennsylvania guy, he was saying that this was a huge deal for him. And not that it's overwhelming, and he's played in big places. He's been in Norman, he's been down in Austin and done all that stuff. But like, he was just kind of talking about how excited he was to be in one of the shrines of college football and getting a chance to start his career at Ohio State in the Shoe, obviously, and getting a chance to play in front of 105,000 people.
Yeah, I think sometimes that gets overlooked. And we talked about this actually with the naming rights for the stadium, Bob. It never diminishes the feel and the vibe and the intensity and the nostalgia for running out of that tunnel in a Shoe with 110,000 fans. I still very vividly remember the Texas game in 2005, Bob, where we barely could get, I think it took us 45 minutes to go from the stadium to the Woody to get to our cars. Yeah. And because there was 200,000 people outside of the stadium, there's 100,000 people in it. I mean, it was just that type of game and that type of environment. And that's why you want to come to an Ohio State. But also, guess what? This year you get to go to the Unso-Happy Valley and play there, which will be super fun in your home state. And then you also get to experience your one time Michigan coming to the Shoe and what that will be like. So, it's something that we don't take for granted. It's something that we remember for a long time. But I'm happy that he also is embracing, I guess, and just soaking in what the moment is like going into his senior year, because you don't want to lose that, man. Every game is precious. Don't lose that.
Well, I heard Ryan talking a little bit today, earlier at his coach's show, and bringing that up. And he goes, you get guys that come in here and they're talking about, finding guys to starter. There's guys that come in, they want to play right away, and they're bound and determined to get on the field, and they get a little disappointed if they're not. And there's guys that come in, it's like, hey, it's a process, and maybe they don't have the intensity. He goes, the problem is with that, before you know it, it's gone, it's over, and you'll be running out of the tunnel on senior day. So you need to have that urgency, that intensity. And in the day right now of the portal, you have to go show the coaches that you're able to play and able to play right away. You can't be a guy that's like, I'm going to develop after my sophomore year, as I'll start as a junior. And Ohio State doesn't really recruit many guys that are like that. But you want guys that are going to come in, that are going to be dogs from the jump. They're upset. Like your guy, Jermaine Dupree, where to party at Matthews. I mean, he came in right away. He wanted to get on the field. He wanted to be ready to rock. and you saw that intensity, you saw that passion out of them. And that doesn't mean the other guys that might be a little more laid back or bad, but you've got to show it and demonstrate it right away. Because if not, they may bring in somebody else who feels like they're a little bit more with that urgency, that ready to go. But you've got the Will Howard exact quote here. I don't know if we can throw that up if we found it or not yet, Pat. But it was pretty powerful when he talked about, he says, "I'm so excited. I can't overstate that, how excited I am. I grew up watching the Big Ten. I played in a lot of places at this point in my career, played in front of hundreds and thousands of people. But the shoe, the atmosphere, it's different, man." He's excited about it, and I'm excited for him. Because, like, do you remember the first time you ran out of the tunnel at Ohio Stadium?
Wasn't it Miami our junior year? First game of the year?
Played Miami our senior year. We played Cincinnati.
Oh, yeah. Cincinnati first game.
Our junior year, I believe.
Yeah. I didn't even know today was Thursday, Bob. So, I don't. I thought it was Wednesday. I've just been going, man. I've been running and gunning. But I will say this. As much as I probably don't, I do remember like the feeling of it. Like, man, this is different, right? I played at the Air Force Academy, 35 to 50,000 people max.
Schlegs, I want to let you know this. On this, since you brought up, I'm glad you brought up the Air Force Academy. Every week I do my Today in History for Morning Juice. And on this date in 1958, the USAF, the United States Air Force Academy, opens in Colorado Springs. How about that?
Yes. How about that, man? And honestly, one of the greatest venues. It's fun. It's like right in the mountains.
Yeah.
They have the flyover. Steph loved going to the games there because we were always like us.
Well, there's a lot of dudes.
Underdogs.
A lot of dudes.
Of course. A lot of cadets there, right? Like 9-to-1 ratio. Anyways, but you go from that environment. You played some big ones there, right? BYU has a really nice venue. A lot of people there, really loud. Going to Utah, beating them. But there's just something different about Ohio Stadium. There's something different about the Big Ten. It's just something that we all, regardless of where you are nationally, I grew up in Dallas, Texas, man. I mean, but I knew about Ohio State. I knew about the Big Ten. I knew what Ohio State defense was. I love the silver bullet helmets. Like, I totally was all into that. And when I got here, like, completely drank the Buckeye Kool-Aid. And I'm a Buckeye for life, man. You know it, Bob. I believe scarlet and gray. So for a guy, again, that's what you like to see. But it also goes in the fits from the portal and the recruiting process to bring the right guys in that are then going to be all in. And that's what you want. When you're just testing the waters, like, you can't fully embrace and appreciate all the things that are the Ohio State University.
Just diving. You don't want just the tip, Schlegs.
Nobody likes that.
Thing. You're a guy that really likes to take that whole deal, and that's a big piece of it. Speaking of that, got a little NIL news. We can throw this up about the top collectives around the country and how that's going. And for a while, Ohio State was struggling. But as we throw this up here, we can take a look, see that the 1870, the foundation, the two primary collectives at Ohio State, obviously leading the way. You've got Tennessee after that, Texas, Oregon, Miami, Ole Miss, like the usual suspects at the top. But for Ohio State, people that kind of follow this, I've talked to it on my radio show. I've alluded to it a lot of places. Not organized at the beginning. Much, much better spot now. They've done a good job. I'm excited for what Ross Bjork has been able to do. Now that we're going to have the TV money that'll come in, should be a pretty good bucket. Everyone talks about, hey, people will say they bought this team. They bought this. They didn't. They brought a lot of guys back. If you can give guys a reason to come back, that helps. But it's not like they have some quarterback they paid $5 million to, or all these guys. It's a collective sharing, and I think they've done a pretty darn good job of it. And Schlegs, you worked with these guys the last 6 months. You worked at Ohio State during the national championship run in 2014. You played there in 2003, 4, and 5. Is there any difference to these guys now than there was then?
You know what, Bob? I appreciate you asking that question because the answer is no. You would think that the money would be able to change people. And Bob, people don't realize this. You, me, and AJ were doing our own collective once we graduated, right? We were setting up our own autograph signings and stuff and doing that. Remember, we had like y'all's girlfriend, Steph, like we each had our own little bag. And like
that was after.
I know. But what I'm saying is, like, we did that on our own after our senior year. And And there was no problem with that. Like, we understood each other's value. I guess that's the point I was getting to, right? Yeah. My value was not as high as yours, Bob, or AJ's, right? So, but we understood where our value was. And when you look at this and you look at the locker room and you look at the way that they trained and you look at the convos that they had in the midst that I was in, they're just like us. They're just doing the exact same thing. I mean, honestly, going back and thinking about our workouts and some of the craziness that we did to get in there, we would have loved it more this way. And I'm talking about like the training than when we were there. But like these guys embrace it all. And guys, the standard I'm talking about now, culture fit, regardless of how much you make in NIL, regardless of who you are, where you came from, or what is your projection, it doesn't matter. I'm telling you right now, you could be a Will Howard or you could be a walk-on. You were freaking late for one of Nick's workouts. You out the building, bro. He did boom, right? And he's very polite about it. But like, boom, you ain't working out. Like, you got to come back. Guess who else is out? Boom. Position coach, that's on you. Unit leader, boom. But there's a standard. And everybody understands that because there is no gray. And the one thing I thought about NIL would be, man, there'd be a lot of gray. You're going to have a lot of guys like, man, why is that guy making 350? And I just whooped his ass all over the place like that. Like I should be getting that 350. I'm not going to say that those conversations or thoughts don't go into people's minds, but they're not verbalized from what I have been able to see. And it doesn't stop people from continuing to work. Because ultimately you get 2 times to negotiate now in the offseason. Guess what? Just go keep winning. Just go keep getting better. Just work.
Provide value. Be a dude. Do the things you need to do. And you said we had, after the school, you got out, we were able to go sign autographs. And you know what? Guys got X. Maybe you got 2X. Maybe you got 3X. AJ's getting 5X. Like, but everybody understood, like, Dave, this is what it was. This is how it worked out. And everybody was aware of it. And you know what? When everyone works hard, you're giving the right money to the right guys. It's all fine. I want to throw this up here. We got Ari Temkin, who's going to join us. Does a great job covering Big 12 radio, Sirius XM, tune in. But I want to throw up the team, the individuals here so we can see. Because right at the top, oh, yeah, you've got Shedeur Sanders. You've got Quinn Ewers. I mean, you've got Hunter. You've got some usual suspects. I want to get Ari's thoughts on that coming up next here on the Bobby Carpenter Show.
We were called soft last year. You don't want to be soft, especially when you come to the playoffs. So that's going to be a process throughout this season of establishing us as a harder team here in the
They're off in the Kentucky Derby as Authentic takes them around the far turn. Tis the Laws making his move now, and they're into the stretch. These two stride for stride. Authentic, tis the Law. Here's the wire. Authentic has won the Kentucky Derby.
I don't buy into this nonsense, this conspiracy nonsense that he's got his money and he's dogging it. That's ridiculous.
All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show. And now we're pleased to be here with my guy, Ari Temkin. Got a chance to share the radio waves with him. Give him a follow at Ari Sports on X. Doing a great job out there covering the Big 12 on TuneIn. Ari, thanks for coming in, hopping on the show here as we start off this big-time week 1 of college football.
Thanks for having me, guys. This is awesome. I didn't even realize I went to Highland Park High School in Chicago, but I live in Dallas now, so I know exactly
there you go.
where Schlegs is from. So yeah, this is great. This is awesome.
So the fact that you live in Dallas, Ari, you'll fully appreciate that, because I didn't appreciate till I got down there. My man Anthony Schlegel was down for half his college career, or high school career rather, in DeSoto, a little bit southwest of Dallas, I guess you could say.
Yeah, DeSoto and Highland Park are a little bit different.
Just a little.
That. I mean,
both great at football, but yeah, a little bit different.
Both great at football, but I mean, it's like the difference between continents as far as like the demographic, the area, the region. It is remarkable. And my man Schlegs, ironically, was captain at both places. So a man of the people, can fit in with everybody. and loved by all. So excited to have you on here, Ari. I don't know if you saw the final graphic we threw up there about the highest paid players, and I'm not sure how they were able to ascertain that via the NIL and the portal. And you've got obviously Shedeur up there, you've got Travis Hunter up there. Like, is that a big deal? Like, is Colorado? They've invested so heavily in a couple players. I mean, are they going to see the payoff this year with Deion?
It's a great question. I mean, it's sort of stunning. The graphic you put up previously that showed from a team perspective where it was all at. I don't know that I was surprised by that because, like you said, it's the usual suspects. But to see a Big 12 team have two of the top three in 2024, when the Big 12 from a brand perspective isn't nearly where it needs to be or will be hopefully eventually. Yeah, I mean that's shocking. It's the Prime effect, right? I mean, I don't know that if it's not Shedeur Sanders at quarterback or Travis Hunter, who's just an incredible player on both sides of the football, that we're looking at those kinds of numbers. So it's definitely unique to those specific players and the relationship with Prime. But I mean, look, Shedeur Sanders was sacked 56 times last year.
Exactly.
56. And he put up some ridiculous numbers despite basically being under fire on every single snap when he dropped back. So, I think he's got the potential with a little bit more protection to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football, which is why there's so much, noise around him. They've got great weapons and they have improved their offensive line, but you've got a true freshman at left tackle. And then you've got a bunch of transfers. And as we know, it's not just about the individual players in the offensive line. That is more than any position in football about the collective.
And we've been seeing this too, right? So we had a graphic up about Ohio State, the foundation, the 1870 Society. So, hey, shout out to our guy Cardale Jones and Sean Steens. And there's a lot of guys, Bob. You're way more in the weeds of that, but that's what it takes, right, Ari? And that you said the Prime effect. And I think he gets a lot of stuff, right, because of how he acts. We know he kicked out a reporter and all that. But that's now part of being a CEO in college football. Like, you got to go do the foundation, the 1870 Society, and be able to generate revenue. That it's not just I can be an X's and O guy. That's why we also saw Chip Kelly probably leave UCLA to come be a coordinator. And so that goes to the question of them being able to reap this tonight. I know they've gotten a little bit better, but now they got an FCS team at home, primetime, Thursday night. Are you looking at that game is going to be close? Are you thinking that they're going to make a statement? Because last year they came out hot, and then they lost steam, right? And they went 4-8. Like, are they going to be able to sustain this year now in the Big 12?
And by the way, what I think you said about Chip Kelly is so interesting, and I think it plays into like what the motivations are now for college coaches.
Yes.
But to answer your question, so like, for me, it's really hard to have a reasonable discussion about Colorado because nobody wants to. They live in the margins. It's either they're going to be the best team in college football or they're the worst team in college football. The perceptions of them were skewed last year because they got off to the hot start, but they hit the over last year and they're over under. I mean, they won one football game the previous year. They've been one of the worst programs in college football. I went to Kansas. They were where Kansas was pretty much for the last decade over the last couple of years. So the fact that they even won 4 games last year is kind of a miracle. And their over under this year is 5.5. I mean, I take the over. I think this is a 6, 7, 8 win team. That's, again, having a reasonable contextualized discussion about a team that has a lot of talent and certainly improved along the offensive and defensive personnel wise. I do have questions about their defensive coordinator. Deion loves the ex-NFL guys. It's a guy that came in that's longtime Livingstone, longtime NFL coach, never called plays before. So there's a transition there. And then Pat Shurmur, who Deion says can definitely identify with college kids these days. It's just hard to believe. We know Pat Shurmur knows offense, though, and so I'm less concerned about that. I just think it's funny that Deion's talking about Shurmur knowing how to relate to kids, and it's like, really? It's moved from that. But I digress. Look, I think North Dakota State obviously that's a really good program at the FCS level, as consistent as it gets. Oklahoma State has South Dakota State. I mean, you're talking about the powers of the FCS. And we've seen those guys. I mean, North Dakota State years ago knocked off K-State in an opening game. But I just don't think they're going to surprise Colorado. I think Colorado's been hearing for months now that North Dakota State could beat them. And I think when an FCS team is able to upset a Power 4 team or a major team, it's because they're being overlooked. Now, granted, Colorado's got a pretty decent game the next week. And so, are they overlooking them? I just don't think so. I don't buy it. Are they the best team in the Big 12? No, I didn't predict them to win the conference, but I don't think 8 wins the stretch. I think the over is a pretty good bet for them. I think they'll be anywhere between 6 and 8 wins. And again, go back. They averaged 2.3 yards per carry last year on the ground, 56 sacks, and their quarterback had like a 70% completion percentage with 27 touchdowns and 3 picks. That's ridiculous. Regardless of how you feel about Shedeur Sanders personally, those are ridiculous numbers considering they ran for 2 yards a carry and he took 56 sacks.
Let me ask you this, Ari, because I saw the majority of the money on the money line is coming in on North Dakota State. If I told you 8 to 10 minutes left, it is a 1-possession game, do you feel any differently about who do you think would win that game at that point?
Yeah, because I mean, I do like Colorado to cover. I think it's 9.5 points. It's interesting you say that on the money line, and maybe that's just the potential there, and a lot of people reacting to the idea that maybe North Dakota State could win that game. I just like we talk about those two numbers: 56 sacks, 2.3 yards per carry.
Yeah.
Like that is a reflection of a really, really bad offensive line. I just don't see any way in which that offensive line is as bad or worse.
Oh,
so with all of that. Now, granted, maybe their running game, maybe I haven't fixed that, but I just like their talent has improved. Now, again, along the offensive line, it's about way more than talent, but I just don't see a situation in which their offensive line is that bad. And again, I mean, Bobby, if we look at the end of the game and it's close, like how do we get there?
Yeah.
Is Shedeur throwing a couple of picks? Have they fumbled? Like, is their defensive line being dominated, or is North Dakota State putting up points? I think more of the context associated with it is what would scare me off of that. But I do. If my pick is Colorado to win and cover tonight.
Okay, I like that. We're gonna take a quick break here, Schlegs. We're up against it. Take a quick break. So I want to come back. I want to ask Ari. We got West Virginia and Penn State. Huge matchup for both conferences, both schools. West Virginia came out of nowhere last year. Little conference realignment question for Ari. And then maybe the perception on Ohio State from the Midwest and how that ultimately looks from out there in the plains. Coming up here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show.
Well, how do they know I'm doing this? Did somebody leak this out?
It's social media.
Oh.
That's the way social media works now.
I thought maybe you were just running that yap.
Welcome to Big Play, a sports media team that started back in 2014, and now we're not in a garage. Look at us, incorporating some of Cleveland's favorite sports personalities, bringing you fun and compelling content from downtown Cleveland. Coming to you live from the shores of Lake Erie and Burke Lakefront Airport, join Team Big Play for all the best sports talk in Ohio. Check us out on social media at Big Play, bringing you fun and compelling content from downtown Cleveland.
All right, welcome back into the Bobby Carpenter Show, and thanks for tuning in here with us. Still with our guy Ari Temkin covering the Big 12. Tune in, give him a follow on X at Ari Sports. Does a great job, and I've known him for a number of years. Second favorite Ari all time. Ari Gold, obviously the number one. And so I'm sorry, Ari, I don't think you'll ever be able to replace Jeremy Piven's iconic character. Like you can't even compete against it because it's no longer making new episodes. He's been retired, so you're basically challenging a ghost, but you're doing your best, and I really love you. I appreciate you for obviously coming on today.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank you.
I want to ask you about before we get into the Penn State West Virginia game, so I know that's big. If I were to ask you, because you're like right in the epicenter of that with the Big 12, could you name me all of the teams in all of the different conferences that they were realigned to? From basically the Pac-12 and SEC, Big 12, everything else.
We're going to spend the next decade trying to figure out who's in what conference, and we work in this business. I mean, it's insane. So you want me to name you the 16 teams of the Big 12 or where they came from?
No, the 16. Just name the movement. Who came into the Big 12 this year?
So this year, that's an easy one. Arizona State, Colorado, and Utah. Basically, the remnants of the Pac-12. I guess we now have the zombie Pac-12. But yeah, Colorado State, Utah, Arizona State on the heels of adding BYU, Independent, and then 3 from the American Athletic Conference last year, Houston, UCF, and Cincinnati. So it basically in a year, a conference that, once had 10 teams now has 16 teams, 8 of which have joined over the course of last year. So it is a brand spanking new conference.
And I'm going to jump in and here's the deal though. People don't understand this. It was important for them to get Cincinnati, UCF, the Arizonas, the Utah, like BYU guys. They're hitting different demographics, right? You got to be able to put money in the pocket, but it also helps in the recruiting because now they can actually go to Florida. People don't realize why are we grabbing these people? Well, it's because hey, West Virginia needs a barrier. They need to be able to go into Ohio. They've done it before, but you got Cincinnati there now, right? Hey, we can go into Florida, UCF, and these schools want money. They want to get better, so that's why they're hopping in. Anyways, sometimes people don't understand the back end of that, Ari.
Well, yeah, and a few years ago when Texas and OU were bolting, the conference was left for dead. And so, at that point in time, Bob Bowlesby grabbed who he thought were viable based on what you've just laid out, the markets, being in Orlando, being in Cincinnati. Those are 2 talent-rich states. They're on, they're both – Cincinnati's obviously had some success, the college football, getting to the college football playoff. UCF, last year was the first year that UCF lost multiple games at home in their history. So it's right. These are iconic programs at a lesser level, and they took their lumps last year. But no, the Big 12 isn't around anymore, if not for the additions of the 4 last year and then the 4 this year.
So one of the teams that started off this little realignment, West Virginia, when Big East was kind of dissolving, they slid over, joined the Big 12, helped kind of round that out after there were some departures, the movement of A&M and Missouri and different things like that. So they slide in there. They're taking on West Virginia. Last year, Ari, I was putting Neil Brown to death. I thought that they were done. He was going to get fired. Lo and behold, they play Penn State tight. They go on to win 9 games, finish up 9-4, look pretty good. Could have potentially won 10. They were in some other close ones. Pat McAfee show going to be out there. They said they shut down Morgantown today because this thing is going to be off the chain. How big of a game is this for West Virginia in the Big 12 to keep this thing competitive, close, and downright possibly win it?
Yeah. So number one, I picked West Virginia to win the Big 12 this year. It is a league of parity. I picked Oklahoma State to win the Big 12 last year as a stupid pick, but they ended up playing for the Big 12 championship. I say a stupid pick because there was no reason on paper before the season to pick them. I was just betting on Mike Gundy, and they started
Mike Gundy is always the reason, Ari.
Yeah, right. Totally. And they started 1-2 and rotating 3 quarterbacks. So I looked even dumber when the season started. But I digress. I picked West Virginia this year. The one thing that gives me pause on that is their schedule is really, really tough. But I love Garrett Green, and I'll get in a little bit more in depth on why I like West Virginia to win the conference this year. But first, I want to address your question. This game is so important for the conference. In fact, we talked with Neil Brown yesterday, and they're probably there. I'll say it. There is not a bigger game for the Big 12 than this game, and they have to win it. The Big 12 struggled last year in the non-conference. You had Oklahoma State lost to South Alabama. You had Miami of Ohio beat Cincinnati. The Big 12 lost 3 games to MAC opponents, which does include Oklahoma State losing to South Alabama and Baylor losing to Texas State. So perception, guys, matters a ton right now. In the Big 12 with Texas and Oklahoma, that used to be a good litmus test for the rest of the conference. How good are you? What'd you do against Texas and OU? Huge for perception. They no longer have that. There's no longer a perception team that is, once you get into conference play, you kind of have to live on how these teams are playing against one another. But it's the non-conference games that are so important, and especially the ones against the Big 10 and the SEC. For the Big 12 to get multiple bids to the college football playoff this year and any year moving forward, they need these wins. And there's no bigger game than the one on Saturday between West Virginia and Penn State. You've got UCF, Florida, Oklahoma State, Arkansas. There's a few, but none of them touch the level of Penn State, West Virginia. And if you play it out, and let's just say UCF loses to Florida, and UCF finishes in the top 5 of the Big 12, and Florida finishes in the bottom 5 of the SEC. Perception is reality. Yeah. There's no chance the Big 12 gets a second bid here. So, we know about the playoff in terms of the one bid for the Big 12, but and let's be honest, guys. It sucks for the Big 12. You are not the best version of yourself week 1, right? So to think that all of this pressure resides on West Virginia to win this game for the conference, and to me, it can't be close. They've got to win it. They have to win this game. And I mean, you're not the best version of yourself as a team week 1 or in the non-conference at all, but that's just sort of the bed that the Big 12 has to lie in right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so can they my biggest thing with West Virginia is, will they be able to move the ball on that defense? Because we already know, like, in order to stop Penn State, make them one-dimensional. We've seen that. You can. The question of Penn State is Aller. So, but can they move the ball on that defense? That's kind of my biggest question. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, and look, what's funny on the defensive side is they tried to make them one-dimensional, and it was one of Aller's best games last year in that game. I mean, they definitely tried to take the run away, and Aller was making throws down the field. And I wonder if defensively they take a different approach this year, because they've got a really good defensive coordinator in Jordan Leslie, who's been dynamite. In terms of their offense, look, I'm a big believer in Garrett Green. When you look at sort of where he started as a freshman and would come in and spell Jarrett Doege at times as kind of a running threat, really athletic. And then last year, his development took a major step forward when he, became much more of a passer and much more of a well-rounded quarterback. Now, his completion percentage last year is not good enough. He's got to be completing balls at a higher percentage. And he made mistakes. I mean, you go back, they won 9 games last year and lost a game at Houston where Garrett Green threw a touchdown pass on 4th down with 10 seconds left and then chucked his helmet on the ground, which led to a penalty, which allowed Houston to get in field goal range and kick a game-winning field goal. They had that game won, and that's 10 wins. So it's stuff like that where it's like, all right, he's got to grow and grow up from that. And as you guys know, you assume that everybody, when they get older, they get better, but that's not always the case. A lot of it's what's between the years. And I just knowing Garrett Green a little bit, like, I trust that he's going to do the right things to develop and become the best version of himself. Along with Garrett Green, they've got a 2-headed monster running back in a guy, Jaheim White, who was averaging 7 yards a carry last year, just didn't get enough. And then CJ Donaldson, who's a converted tight end. He's one of the biggest running backs you'll ever see. And he's a guy that's got great vision, even as being a tight end. So not to mention the wide receivers they have, and then Wyatt Milam's their left tackle, who will probably be a 1st or a 2nd round pick in the upcoming NFL draft. So, look, Penn State is a different animal. I mean, that team is built on defense. I'm very curious to see, though, as a Kansas alum and fan, now they've got Andy 𝗟𝗏🗘, the former offensive coordinator of Kansas. And that is a far cry offensively from what James Franklin had been running. Now they run the ball a ton, but in terms of the window dressing, the pre-snap motion, the movement, the shifts, like that stuff we're not used to seeing. And so I wonder how much, and this was always the question when Franklin hired 𝗟𝗏🗘 to run this offense, how much are they going to be 𝗟𝗏🗘 and how much are they going to be sort of that ground and pound, conservative James Franklin offense? Because I think that plays into the defensive side too, in terms of how they want to approach offense. It's weird because we haven't really seen what their offense is going to look like. We've seen 𝗟𝗏🗘 in Buffalo. It looked a little bit different, but the recent version of Andy 𝗟𝗏🗘, it'll be interesting to see kind of what we see from an offensive perspective. And I think that will impact their defense.
All right, before we get you out of here, Ari, just want to get your perception of where nationally people think Ohio State's at. We live, when you live close to something and you're inundated with it, sometimes it can be difficult to kind of pull yourself back, give the 30,000-foot view. What does it look like from you from the outside? What are your expectations for the Buckeyes this season?
Maybe I'm in the minority here. Bob, you mentioned earlier, you said something like, the best team money can buy. People might say, and it's like, who cares? That shouldn't be a thing anymore. Oh, is that a bad thing? Like, if you got it, flaunt it. That's the name of the game. Play the game, And the fact that they did it without even having to pay the quarterback, who knows what they paid Will Howard. But certainly the amount of money that's been reported that's been spent on that roster, we hope it goes and is well served. I mean, look, Texas isn't getting that, but the Pancake Club that Texas established at the beginning of the NIL era got them DJ Campbell and Kelvin Banks. They're not playing in the college football playoff last year without those two guys. So that's the way of the world right now. We shouldn't be complaining about teams that buy players, because that's the way it works. And you know what? If you can buy players, pay for good players, and then it works out, and you've got the right leadership and the right coaches that allow that team to come together and play well, that might be harder to do than not doing that. So they should get credit for it. The other thing about Ohio State from the outside is just, and especially from a Big 12 perspective, it is crazy. It's crazy that Kansas State's backup quarterback would become the starting quarterback at Ohio State University. Like, that is just weird to say. It's weird to acknowledge. Avery Johnson, who takes over and most likely would have taken over, it's big time talent. I mean, he had 5 rushing touchdowns in a game last year against Texas Tech. and Chris Kleiman raves about his ability to throw. So we'll see it. But I mean, Will Howard's a gamer, man. He obviously doesn't have that dual threat ability, but he's got a big time arm. You know, he will sit in the pocket and deliver throws down the field with his arm. I'm excited. I think Will Howard's the right person, right teammate. He's a guy you want to root for. You know, a guy that was benched at times and then had to come back and learn from the mistakes he made as a true freshman starter. So he's a guy I definitely root for. But it's super funny that we're talking about a team that allegedly spent $20 million on a roster last year, and they have the backup quarterback from Kansas State coming in.
Absolutely. Well, Ari, we appreciate the time. Thank you. One of the best. Love to have you back on and keep doing
anytime
a
you
great
guys
job.
need. Appreciate you guys. Take care.
Thank you. It's Ari Temkin. Does a great job covering the Big 12 for TuneIn. Fantastic. Can't wait to have him on in the future as well. All right, coming up next, we've got our headlines. Break down some of the big games of the weekends, the top stories here brought to you by Affinity Whole Health. That's up next here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Bobby Carpenter. I want to give a huge thank you and a shout out to Affinity Whole Health, the leaders in the testosterone replacement industry. I've been on a testosterone replacement program for a few years right now, and I've got to tell you, it's been an absolute game changer. Affinity Whole Health has allowed me to be the best version of myself, both mentally and physically. I loved how easy it was to get started. I booked my free consultation, met with my prescriber, checked my numbers, and Affinity Whole Health designed a program that was customized to fit my needs. So I'm telling you guys, if you have low energy, you want to get rid of that spare tire around the waist or take it to the next level in the bedroom, Affinity Whole Health is the place to get started. So don't wait any longer. 5 minutes of your time, book your free consultation. You're going to love the way you feel. All right, now we've got our headlines, and they are brought to you by Affinity Whole Health. Affinity Whole Health, they offer personalized treatment plans to help people feel better, whether you've got struggling with weight loss, sleep loss, low energy, you want to gain some muscle mass. They can help with all of that. Affinity Whole Health. They provide expert guidance so that you can do a fantastic job to meet your health goals and get you back to being the person you want to be. They've got Ohio covered. Offices, a couple of them in Columbus, a couple up in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio. They're in Indy, they're in Chicago. They're all over the Midwest. So go check them out at affinitywholehealth.com. Get your free consultation. That is affinitywholehealth.com. All right, Schlegs, we got some headlines for you. And getting ready to fire away, getting ready to roll. They announced the kick returners, the special teams returners for Ohio State. They've got the punt returners and the kick returners out there. People always wonder, you're going to go with starters in this? Do you go with backups? What do you choose to do? And I don't know if we can toss this up there or not. The two kick returners that they have, senior Jaden Ballard, who's out of Massillon, Ohio, sophomore Carnell Tate, two guys that they've got working back there returning kicks. Those will be your two primary. And then also the two punt returners that are going to be out there. We've got senior Emeka Ibuka and sophomore Brandon Innes. And so when you look at those two guys and you see, those four Schlegs, you've got one senior, one sophomore. I think they're going to rotate it, do a little bit by committee. Are you satisfied? Are you surprised at all that no one else is on there? What are your initial thoughts?
It doesn't matter who else is on there. They can put whoever they want in there, right? So, Jaden Ballard, really fast guy, more opportunity when you start to think about who are their first three guys, right? The more times you can potentially get touches, the more that you can show out. He's a senior. I like it, right? He's super fast. I mean, he's one of those high 23, maybe even creeping 24-mile-an-hour guys, man. That's Jaden. Carnell Tate, obviously. Then you look at the punt returners. Emeka and Brandon are very, very similar type guys like that. And I'll tell you this, I didn't even know that Brandon was a sophomore. I thought he was like a junior. Just about how the way he handles himself. He handles his business as though he's an upperclassman. He's one of those Jermaine Matthew-esque dogs, just ready to go, gas station ready type guys. Love that pairing as well. Because again, that's just about ball security, making sure that I do the right thing, call poison or fire, whatever, but also take care of the football and get vertical, get some yards. So I love it.
Surprised Caleb Downs not on the punt returner list?
No, listen, be a safety, be the best safety. Sometimes we get confused, right? All things in business, I want to be this. Just be elite at what you're elite at, what you should be elite at, right? Number one focus, safety.
Yeah. They might try to get him some running back reps, get him in there a little bit as well.
He can go back and do this too, Bob. Like, hey, go out there, let's get it done. But, like, let these guys handle the ball.
I know. It's like, believe me, it's not set in stone. There is no hard and fast. Like, these are the only guys that will be returning punts or returning kicks. But I think people are, there's an excitement about wanting to see Caleb Downs. But I love the fact you got Jaden Ballard in there. I think he had a good camp, played really well. Carnell Tate, another explosive athlete who has kind of been overshadowed a little bit in training camp by J.J. Smith and just how good he has been. And obviously, Emeka, you got your sure-handed safety back there for punts. And Brandon Smith, like you said, Brandon Innes, rather. I mean, he's a dude. And
he's a dude,
you trust him. You feel good about him being back there as well. Something else that popped up, in the headlines, FanDuel, they ranked their top 10 college football players since 2000. And I saw this list, and I like a lot of the guys on there, but I don't think it's fully comprehensive, and I'm kind of shocked that no Buckeyes made the list. If we want to be able to throw this up, number one, and we'll get in here, it'll be tossed up in a second. Like, there's guys on here that you're going to see, Cam Burrows, the Vince Young, or Cam Newtons, the Joe Burrows, the Vince Youngs, like Baker Mayfield. I get all that. Deshaun Watson. I'm surprised, though, that you don't see on this list probably one of the biggest omissions. And it's a guy, honestly, that's kind of surprising because he, in the Heisman voting, until I think Joe Burrow surpassed him, he had the greatest percentage of Heisman votes of all time. And that's Troy Smith. And so when we get this here tossed up in a second, we'll be able to hammer down the list. But it's a lot of guys that have won the Heisman Trophy, some guys that potentially haven't, guys that have gone on to great NFL careers. Some of them haven't. But we'll start this. We'll start at the top. Cam Newton, number 1. You got Tim Tebow, number 2. Reggie Bush, number 3. Joe Burrow, number 4, LSU Tigers. Baker Mayfield of Oklahoma, number 6 or 5. Vince Young, number 6. Lamar Jackson, number 7. Deshaun Watson, number 8. Justin Blackmon, number 9. Marcus Mariota, number 10. Now, all of those guys outside of Justin Blackmon are quarterbacks. So, I understand that. It's obviously a heavy quarterback lean when you start breaking down to it and getting into it. But are you surprised at all, Schlegs, that Troy didn't make this list?
Yeah, 100. Troy was phenomenal. Heisman Trophy winner. They put the top 10 offensive players since that time. I don't understand the Marcus Mariota, but I will say
he was good. He won a Heisman Trophy, Schlegs.
I get it, but not over Troy. And I just probably remember the Marcus Mariota from the 2014 National Championship and just what we were able to do to them. But here's the deal. I don't really care about lists. I just started thinking about some of the best, like since the 2000s, best Buckeyes, offensive guys, like one that is just a freak athlete that, we kind of sleep on sometimes. Like there's Braxton. Somebody put out there, like Braxton was a freak, man. I remember in that 14 year, like he got hurt, like he broke his ankle, and JT had to come in, and then Cardell came in. Like that was going to be his year. Yeah, guys, and it didn't happen just because of an injury. But he could have been a guy that was easy on there because he had all sorts of buttons on the joystick. There's so many great athletes that come from Ohio State. I don't really care about lists and what they are. You and I both played against in the era of Reggie Bush, Vince Young. Vince Young was just a beast.
He's good.
Lamar Jackson still the same, right, at a high level. Deshaun Watson was really consistent at Clemson, but I don't know. Not a big list guy.
It's tough because all those guys are worthy. They're all really good players. Surprised that there wasn't a Buckeye on there. It was Troy, whether it's Braxton, whatever it ultimately was. Kind of shocked to not see anybody on there. All right, we're going to throw a pin in this. We've got coming up next our tailgate talk where we answer your questions. Got an interesting one yesterday in the comments on the YouTube. Got a couple of different comments. We'll dive into that here next on the Bobby Carpenter Show.
We were called soft last year. You don't want to be soft, especially when you come to the playoffs. So that's going to be a process throughout this season of establishing us as a harder team here in the
They're off in the Kentucky Derby as Authentic takes them around the far turn. Tis the Laws making his move now, and they're into the stretch. These two stride for stride. Authentic, tis the Laws. Here's the wire. Authentic has won the Kentucky
I don't buy into this nonsense, this conspiracy nonsense that he's got his money and he's dogging it. That's ridiculous.
All right, Schlegs, now we're going to be in some tailgate talk here. We got two questions that I kind of want to get into. Since I had the shoulder pads on yesterday that I wore the night before at football practice, question came in. Do shoulder pads differ from position to position? I would think QBs would have to be a little different, helping them throw better. Maybe you could use your shoulder pads as a visual to help kind of show the difference. So, Schlegs, if you want to kind of talk about it a little bit, I might reach over and actually grab my shoulder pads.
Yeah, so, I mean, for one, like shoulder pads are going to have probably a rib protector that's attached. You've seen young people start to wear like shirts that have padding, but they'll probably have some type of rib protection, right, in case they get hit. You know, one thing, too, is shoulder pads over the years have gotten smaller. When we played, we liked big shoulder pads because it made us look bigger. Huge neck roll. How about even a cowboy collar inside of a neck roll? Something really crazy, right, if you want to get exotic. But D linemen and guys that are coming downhill and thumping your tight ends of the world, your linebackers of the world, their pads were a little bigger. Now, defensive lineman pads are really kind of similar to DB pads because they want to be able to move. The game has just changed. You want a bigger breastplate for those guys, and you got to make sure that you cover the entire shoulder joint, right? Because they got to be tight because if not, they're flopping around. And now I'm just going to take somebody on. It's going to be, loose, and I'm not actually protecting the shoulder. Now, you also see how do they make sure the jerseys stay tight. That's where they put double-sided tape on their jerseys so people can't grab stuff. But overall, shoulder pads have definitely gotten, the size has been reduced. And part of that is technology. There's a company out there called, I think it's Impact, Bob, where they're literally like put their hand down, put the Impact shoulder pad on like top of this and like hit it with like a sledgehammer or whatever. And it's like, it works great, right? So because of technologies, things have gotten better in the protection of your shoulder pad.
One of the things, the quarterbacks, they have more of an open slot here because they don't hit it all. So that to open that up to be able to throw, they won't have these extra pads. It'll be smaller, obviously. D linemen now get these things cut down. Like Schlegs said, they're tailored far more down now than they were 15 years ago. These are probably 10, 12 years old, 12, 15 years old. But they're a lot smaller now. Even when we were in college, they were a little bigger. But different positions, just if you're not hitting a lot, those wide receiver quarterback pads, they're very tiny. Look at Schlegs and that giant neck roll he's got there, cowboy collar, feeling good. Final question, Schlegs. We got about a minute, not even 30 seconds to answer this. Someone brought up Corey Stringer and the heat stroke and everything. And, people obviously thousands dying every year. I mean, people do die of heat exhaustion. That is real. But that's also due, Schlegs, to lack of water and resources and the ability to monitor those things. 30 seconds, floor is yours.
And then there's another thing too, guys. Like anytime you have a program, like who has sickle cell? Who has pre-existing things? Have you already been sick? Like there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. There's not one size fits all. Right, exactly, man. Obesity, right? Like, listen, man, there's a lot of different things that go into it. The number one thing is just be safe. Doesn't mean you have to stop doing what you're doing. Just make sure you take breaks. Make sure you communicate that you got to be hydrated. And I totally get everybody's thing, but it's not a one size fit all, just so you know. And every day in college, right? Where is the AED? What's the emergency action plan? How much were these guys hydrating? Where's the AED and is water accessible? Have we progressed them 50, 30, 20, 10 to go into training? That all is part of it, just so you guys know.
All right, take a quick break. We'll wrap up the show. Bobby Carpenter Show. All right, welcome back in. Final segment here on the Bobby Carpenter Show. Thanks for being with us again today. We got tomorrow, real big show for you. Going to be joined by my guy Jacob Hester. USC LSU going to be the big game on Sunday night. He is out there in Vegas. He'll join the show with us to break down that a little bit. Talk obviously a lot of Ohio State Akron. Get really in the weeds for you tonight, and we'll talk about some of the Thursday night games at UNC Minnesota, Colorado, and North Dakota State, depending on how that game ultimately looks. Schlegs, what are you going to be watching tonight?
I'll watch that Colorado, and then I'll watch Minnesota. I'll just watching those two back and forth.
All right. I like it. I'll be hopping over. I'm going to try to go to the OAR concert for a little bit tonight,
Ooh,
just
nice.
to see my guy Jerry DePizzo, watch them rock out, then come home, settle in, and start watching my first Thursday night college football of the year. Incredibly excited for that. Thank you for tuning in. Stay with us on this edition of the Bobby Carpenter Show.